Hello everyone, Dr. Sturm here again with Pivotal Group. In this video, we're going to discuss selling from the chair, something that you know, I like to do quite a bit. You want to do it in such a way where you're not going to come off as a salesman, but I think it does improve your revenue per sale, second pairs, capture rate, things like that. So I'm going to go through what I do. This isn't going to be one of those, generalities where I discuss theory of doing what's best for the patient, this and that, but we're going to get to what I do to specifically increase my revenue per sale and generate additional pairs of glasses. Some of the goals that I want to get to here, of course, you need to convince that person that they either need a pair of glasses or need an update. Sometimes that's half the battle. It's kind of funny, you get them, -1 myope, and they're convinced that they're just fine. We want to discuss second pairs, alternative pairs. And we're going to also talk about upgrades, options, how I present those in such a way. Of course, all this is being done so that you don't sound like a salesman, but you are informing that patient, and that does, in the end, affect how they go about getting their glasses. Establishing realistic expectations that may not do much for increasing sales, but actually I think makes a big difference in those people coming back and complaining about things you can't do much about. The way that you present a lot of this stuff, you do need to come across as trustworthy. So you need to, maintain any trust that you've gathered throughout that interaction with the patient. Because once you start talking about, the retail side, if you do it incorrectly, you might lose trust in that patient. They're not going to listen to what you say. And capturing the sale, that's kind of your ultimate goal here. Nice little meme that probably going to be more. You're probably going to notice a little bit more as we continue to see more and more of this online stuff showing back up. So, do I need an RX? Patients, this is, like I said, kind of half the battle. The refraction. I do specific things while I'm performing a refraction, and that I think assist in, convincing, showing, however you want to take this. Showing that patient that they actually do need a prescription or need an update. So there's different techniques that I use. I like to dim the lights a little bit. It increases the pupil size just a little bit, and that blur interpretation, that 20/20 line doesn't look quite as crisp. You're going to see differences, old versus new, a little bit better, in my opinion, from what I've seen. I actually, during the refraction, while I'm performing the refraction, I do some different techniques actually. So, for instance, let's say the patient doesn't have any prescription whatsoever. They're convinced that they're just fine, right? They may even spat out 20/20 on the entering VAs. And let's say they have a -1/4, -50 SIL. What I'll do is monocularly, maybe I did their right eye. I'll click out the 1/4, click out the 50, and I'll say, what do you think? He goes, oh, that's bad. And I say, that's how you see without a prescription. That actually knocks it home quite a bit, actually. And then I'll click that stuff back in real quick, and they'll say, oh, man, I guess you're right. When you do that monocularly, it actually is more impactful. And now in their head, before we even moved over to the left eye, they're convinced, gosh, I probably need something. Whether or not they actually pull the trigger on it is a different story, but I've already convinced them. I think it's easier to do when you show them one eye. Also, another thing to do is sometimes if you've got a previous RX versus new RX, patient comes in and says, oh, these are only a year old, they're just fine. Maybe I only adjusted it by a quarter SIL and a 1/4 sphere. What I'll do is I'll click out a SIL, click out a sphere 1/4, and I'll say, what do you think about that? And they'll say, oh, it's a little fuzzier. I'll say, that's what your old prescription looks like. And I'll click those back in. I'll say, that's what your new one looks like for that eye. And they're like, oh, wow, that's pretty good. That's nice. Now, it's not very much. And if you were to show them that with the trial frame with both eyes, they might not appreciate that small difference. But now they're convinced, gosh, at least they know that right eye is needing a little help. So nice little trick. I do that on a lot of patients. And I use the word trick. I shouldn't use the word trick, but I am showing them real numbers before, real numbers after. But it's a little bit more impactful when you do it with one eye. I do a lot of trial framing. So when I'm done, I'll have that 4-opter in front of them, and I'll pull it up. I'll have them put their old glasses on, and I say, take a look at that 20/20 line, and they pull the glasses off. I pull the 4-opter down. Boom. Old versus new. That's almost just as impactful as just, getting that trial frame and showing them. So, and realistically, they're looking through a glass lens of the 4-opter. The lenses are nice and clean and perfect. optically, and then their glasses might be a little dirty, they might be smudged, the AR might be kind of messed up, but to me that's a good way to show them what a nice, clean, new, fresh RX, even with fresh lenses, will look like. So that's another technique. And of course, just trial framing. Sometimes, let's say the patient left their old glasses at home. I'll throw the trial frame in of their old glasses, and then I'll throw the 4-opter in front of them. I'll show them the difference. They'll say, "Oh yeah, okay." They might have come in just for their contact lens update, but those are good techniques that I like to use. And as far as presbyopes, that's kind of a different story here. I'm going to go to the next slide on the presbyopes. So the near vision check, I've got that 44-year-old. They're doing just perfectly fine as far as they're concerned. What I'll do is I'll put that near card and I'll click in about a diopter of near vision. I'll say, "What do you think about that?" "Oh, that's awesome." I don't let them know what I'm doing first. I let them reply first, because otherwise what they'll do is they'll convince themselves, "Oh, it's not that much better." So, they let me know, "Hey, that's much better." I say, "Well, that's what it looks like if I were to give you a little bit of near help." And then I jump in and discussing, things like multifocals and things like that, which we'll get into in a second. But that's kind of the same technique I'll do with my multifocal contact lenses. I've got a 44-year-old wearing single vision and they're just fine. I'll throw those single visions on and I'll just take a +1 trial frame. I'll put it in front of them at their phone or card and I'll say, "Oh, that's a lot better." And then I'll explain to them what I did. And then I think, they're not super happy about it, but they're convinced and they know what's going on now. Line versus lined, this is where I start talking about, what I just did, right? So there's a couple different ways you can address this. You can do a multifocal with the distance at the top, reading at the bottom, and it does come in kind of a lined and no line. And I might explain that just a little bit, of kind of what the difference is. But keep in mind when we do this, you can't beat a dead horse. You can't talk too much, but you need to do enough where they're actually going to get something out of it. So I'm going to get back to the line versus no line. A lot of these, early presbyopes are pretty resistant. And so I like to make the comment, listen, your near vision is not necessarily coming back. It's inevitable. So sure, you can struggle a couple more years, but why? I'd say, pull the trigger now. It gets much easier to get used to, younger than it is if you were to jump into, +2, +250 later. And that's exactly my next point there. So I do make a note. So sure, you can wait till you're 50 or 52, but right now we're giving you just a +1. It's much easier to adapt to a +1 than it is to jump into a +2, +2, 225, 250. So if adaptation's an issue, which almost everyone brings up these days, they know somebody who can get used to them. I like to make that note. Say, listen, you shouldn't have any problems. It's a low ad. You should be fine. And I talk about the different type of progressives as well. This is what I have on my refraction page. I like to have all the information in front of me. So this is Crystal PM software, and everyone's is a little bit different. And with Crystal PM, you can adjust your template. But I want to know what that patient is walking in with. I want to know what their last refraction, that's basically their last refraction last year, because those two might be different, right? So I want to know that. I want to know what their presenting RX number 2 is, if you got a computer pair of glasses or reading only. Of course, there are auto refraction and Ks, which I left out. I don't want to be too confusing with all the numbers. And then our final RX. So this gives me an understanding of what I want to talk to the patient about, right? Whether, let's say there's no presenting, but they had that last final RX on there and they're not wearing any glasses. So that'd be pretty darn easy to trial frame that and show them, yes, you do. Or, you low presbyope to convince them, yes, this is something that, you can address, with the pair of progressives. So having all this information, the point of this whole slide is having this information in front of you gives you the ability to decide what you want to talk about versus, just kind of skipping over things completely. But a lot of information here, especially when all these are different and you need to decide what you want to address when you talk to that patient. Of course, this is where we get into the, whole standard, what is everyone talking about as far as, what you should tell the patient, based on their lifestyle. So I actually do this, I do talk to the patient. I ask them if, for me, the biggest thing is I want to know if they're working on a computer. I might ask them in kind of a roundabout way, but once I know that, I do specifically address that. Progressives, you're going to want to let them know, if this is, let's say it's a pre-presbyope, right? Early presbyope. you want to let them know that, sure, you don't have to jump into that progressive, but the alternative is you might have two different pairs of glasses. And if you're a busy person, you're running around all day, you're going to want to be able to keep that on. And I also mentioned some people, also think if they're wearing progressive, they have to leave them on all day. I'm very clear about this when I talk about this, especially with my new presbyopes. Just because you can wear it all day doesn't mean you have to. It just means that now you've got all the correction in one pair of glasses, and when you put it on, you can see everything you need to see. So can you take them off when you're cooking? Sure. It's amazing how many people are convinced they have to wear these things all day no matter what, because we say it's a full-time wear. Computer workspace glasses, I trial frame these all the time. I'll set a 50-year-old in front of the computer and give them a 1 or 125, and they're blown away. And I say, listen, it's much easier than have to tilt the head. And of course, all these things are quick, right? You don't want to be in the exam room for 30 minutes talking about lenses. So I literally spend about a minute, maybe 2 minutes tops, discussing some things if it's relevant to that patient. Reading RXs, talk to them about, sure, the progressive is going to work, but, some people just like to have their own specific second pair of reading glasses. I don't really harp a lot on the reading only. I talk a lot about the progressives and the computer prescriptions for the most part. Sun RXs, sure, you can mention that. I don't mention that for everybody, just if it pertains to our conversation that came up, especially for, if we got contact lens wear, sure, I might mention it. What I also mentioned too is if that person is on the cusp of, do I update? Do I need a pair of glasses? I always usually mention, and this is another one of those tactics that I think works pretty well, is if they've got a vision plan, say, hey, listen, you've got IMID, they're going to cover, a good part of the glasses, and when that gets them at least thinking and looking, even if that, and of course we all know that bill's not going to be covered, but it's going to cover part of it, and that gets them looking. Maybe they fall in love with the frame, they're going to purchase. I also mentioned second pair. So for us, we do kind of a second pair sale. So I always mention that, especially when I've got somebody that's maybe in a progressive that wants to get a computer pair of glasses as well. I like to mention it so they're at least thinking about it. And for me, that increases my conversion of second pair sales for sure. Depending on what that person presents with, I may even suggest, hey, you could get a new pair of progressives, and that old, that old pair that you got there, maybe you just keep the frame and redo the lenses. And, some people are like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And so that, sure, you won't do two complete pairs, but you're going to get that second pair of lenses. So, I mention that every once in a while, and trust me, you're not going to shoot yourself in the foot, right? It's like, oh, I could have, sold them the second frame. I guarantee you that patient, if they want a new frame, they're going to get a new frame. That's what I learned. It took me a while to realize that, but if they fall in love with a second frame, they're going to replace the frame anyway. So don't get caught up about mentioning something like that. I think that does help with getting at least a second lenses sold. Progressives, I mentioned adaptation. This is where I like to talk a little bit about the type of progressives. Say, hey, I know you're 44. This is the first time progressive. You're concerned. Your grandma had a hard time. Progressives are much better these days. There's kind of a good, we do a good, better, best, right? So, the basic progressives, they're a little bit less expensive. They don't work quite as well. And then we've got the newer progressives. They work much better. They're easier to get used to, but they come at a little bit higher cost. So I'm mentioning cost benefit there. And so for them, they should realize by the time you're done talking to them is if they want the best chance to adapt to the progressive, they need to go with a little bit better version. So, and I make that pretty clear. So listen, in a perfect world, you're going to get, and if this is all free, you'd get the best progressive because that's going to be your best chance of seeing well and adapting to it. So I like to mention that. And I do mention the price point, that it's going to be more expensive because I want to maintain some of that integrity so they know going in that, yes, it is more expensive. It's better, and it's better for a reason. That's why, the cost is where it is. So yeah, types of progressives, standard versus premium. That's why we do sell a lot of premium lenses, because of the things that I mentioned. Like I said, very quickly, you don't need to harp on this stuff very long. Another thing that I like to mention, especially to some of the women too, is they're really against some of the progressive stuff, or maybe they're not necessarily wanting to jump into the high level progressive. I'll say, listen, your best chance of getting used to this, probably going with a little bit better progressive. you know, and I tell people, if you cannot get used to the top end progressives, you're probably stuck with having to go back to like aligned. And that's for the most part, that's pretty true. A lot of the higher end progressives, if you can't get used to those, jumping back to a more basic is less likely, as far as I'm concerned, getting used to those. So I said, if you want the best chance, jump into the higher progressives. Otherwise, your alternative is either separate glasses or aligned bifocal. And they have that mentality that they're going to make it work. They are scared of going into that line bifocal. I'd also, if asked, I'll discuss the online stuff. So you guys all have your own spiel for that, but it's pretty much impossible to fit a progressive correctly. So I say, well, half the battle is fitting it and adjusting it correctly, and if they can't even address half the battle, then you're pretty much gonna get something that's not gonna work for you. You can mention other things, office lenses, SunRx transitions, things like that. I've got some other things that I'll mention if they come up. But like I said, I pick and choose what I need to talk about with that patient based on our conversation. And like I said, I keep it to a minute, maybe two tops, real brief. When you discuss these things and mention it and keep it brief, and when I discuss about premium things, I usually do mention, hey, those do come at a higher cost. I do maintain some integrity. I think they trust me in knowing, hey, he explained these things, but he gave me a heads up. They do cost more for those better things. So sometimes I'll have patients say, so, well, what do I need? And I usually give them the spiel, listen, in a perfect world where everything was free, you need to get, if you're a presbyope, you need to get the Elite 4K with the, this and with this, and maybe you get a second pair of computer glasses. And of course, they know that the ticket price is going to go up for something like that. But that's how I like to throw it out there, and I usually get a chuckle from them. But you'd be surprised at how effective it can be just letting them know exactly what to get. Like I said, I always mention the cost benefit, right? The more premium products are going to come at a higher cost. The lower costing ones may not, they're still good, but they're not going to be quite as functional as some of the premium stuff. So avoid salesman pitches. You tend to get good at this after you've tried it for a while. Some doctors I know don't say anything about materials, and I think that's a huge mistake. So Zeke and I, of course, everyone probably knows this by now, we work together, and then so we kind of had this, I set him up and he knocked him down, and we did very, very well because of the fact that I discussed it, he mentioned it again. Oh yeah, the doctor talked about that. And so, our percentage of premium products and multiple pairs were kind of through the roof. Capturing the sale, this is the biggest part, right? If they're not going to buy from you, sure, you educated them on buying somewhere else, and hopefully that's not the case. But let them know your recommendation. Hey, do I need an update in my RX? I typically say, hey, remember I showed you the difference between old and new, or no prescription and some prescription, and they'll say, yeah, I guess. And I said, well, technically you're going to see an improvement in vision. I kind of leave it at that, right? I mentioned the vision care plan, if applicable, right? If they've got benefits, sure, go ahead and use them. That makes them feel like there's something that's going to be covered. As we know, it's kind of all smoke and mirrors. Second pair discounts, I mentioned that before. Same day sales tactics. I do this a lot. We have an Edgerton house. We stock a lot of lenses, and so when I've got that patient that comes in and broke their glasses and they want something quick, I'll typically mention, say, hey, they might be able to get this done for you same day or next day possibly. I don't promise them anything. They go next door. They've got this, understanding that, gosh, I can get this back maybe kind of quick. Zeke is of course going to let them know if that power or that lens is available, but they're already shopping, they're already looking around, and that a lot of times captures a sale that might have walked out the door looking for a lens crafters, or maybe not so much lens crafters anymore. They don't do the same day stuff, but we actually also do that with the progressives. So, Susie comes in, she's 65, she has a progressive, she broke it, she's in a tough spot. I say, listen, I'm going to have Zeke put a pair of single vision lenses in there for you, no cost while your progressives come in. And so as long as they purchase those progressives, Zeke's going to edge a pair of single vision lenses, put them in there. We saved the day, we sold her a nice premium set of progressives, and we were only out a couple bucks that cost us to put those single vision stock lenses in. So another important reason why having stock lenses in-house is pretty important. So that's a sale that would have definitely walked out to a VisionWorks or an iMart or something. And I think the handoff's kind of important. And so we won't get into the handoff techniques in this video, but I think that can be pretty powerful in the way that that's done. And of consistency, know the products. I always talk about I actually, in my office, we don't talk about branding, Zeiss, Hoya, Essilor, or Verlux, any of that unless it's brought up. And then I actually give them the alternatives. I say, oh, I know you're in a Verlux, but actually the Elite 4K is just as good, if not better, and it's cheaper. We think it's better. And so that's the reason why we, out of 1,000 Progressives a couple years ago, I think we sold 19 branded lenses. That's it. So all Elite 4Ks or Elites or advanced Solder products, and did very, very well doing so. You need to be on the same page as the staff, right? So if I say something, they should be saying very similar things, right? So if I'm talking about maybe an Elite 4K and they're mentioning that Verlux S's and X's, then we're not on the same page. The handoff technique, like I said, we won't get into that in this video, but I think it can be pretty important. And last point here, selling from the chair is pretty useless if the sales staff and the sales strategies are poor, right? And so Zeke gets into a lot of videos on the sales strategy. So this video just addresses selling from the chair. There's a lot of little techniques and little things that you can say or do. A lot of doctors don't do these things, but I think if you do, you'd be surprised at how many people will, listen, and that will convert to higher sales, higher ticket sales, multiple pairs, things like that. So that's it. Hopefully this brought some value to you guys. If there's any questions on any of this stuff, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.